Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining the online workshop tonight. I hope that everyone already had their dinner, or maybe will have the dinner after our session. And I would like to make it as entertaining and interactive as possible. So, whenever you have any questions or any ideas or anything to say, please raise your voice, or you can also use the chat if you prefer. And I would suggest let's dive right into it. So thank you very much for your time today. My name is Stefan. I'm the founder and executive director of Lion Rock Education. We have prepared a presentation today, which will help you to have a little bit better understanding of the Hong Kong international schools market. And I always compare applying to Hong Kong international schools a little bit like trying to build furniture from IKEA, but the problem is that you don't have the manual. So today we are giving you the first few pages of the manual so that you can get a little bit better understanding of what you have to consider. And we would also reduce the anxiety and hope that you can be a little bit more confident in the very stressful applications journey here in Hong Kong. So what are our promises for today? As I mentioned, the Hong Kong international schools market is very difficult to understand, especially for parents with young children who do it for the first time. Hong Kong schools are notorious for being very intransparent. And in today's session, I would like to give you some advice, some tips, something you can actually use right away in order for you to have a little bit more clarity on this big Hong Kong school maze, as I usually say. And we will also give you a framework, especially because we believe that for the family and especially for the child, we believe that it's most important to find a school that actually fits not only your child, but the whole family, because you would also like to be part of the community. And it's very important that you can also mix and mingle with the other parents. Also, we will give you some actionable insights, some advice that will help you how to make your applications look better and stand out from the others. And of course, we would like you to be confident in the whole process. So we know it creates a lot of anxiety, but with the right tools, with the right approach, with the right mindset, you will be able to go through it without having too much to worry, and also in order to increase the number of offers for the different schools. So we're talking to a lot of parents. Personally, I've worked in international schools for more than 12 years, and I've met thousands of parents. Um, The first thing that we realize is that parents actually do not have much knowledge. Very often, the knowledge that parents have is quite shallow. Their research usually contains information from other parents, from friends or colleagues, or they see some lists of the top IB schools, for example, but they never really go very deep. And I mean, fair enough. I mean, we all have busy lives. Many families are new to the industry. They have heard maybe of a couple of schools, but they don't really know what's out there. And for example, they will ask, what kind of schools should we actually target? Especially for those families from Hong Kong, which they also speak Chinese at home. It's not always obvious what kind of school they should choose. And we have local schools. We have the so-called DSS schools, which I will explain a bit more later. And we have the international and private schools. But which school to choose? What is the budget that we have? How to get more information? What does it actually mean if we send our child to a local kindergarten instead of an international kindergarten? And there are many, many questions and many concerns. And then once you made the decision, okay, let's go for the international schools, then it's becoming even more complicated because all schools have different curriculums, different diplomas. You probably have heard of IB or A levels or the Hong Kong DSE. But what does it actually mean? And is IB really the best one because it's so popular here in the region? Or might maybe A levels be better if we want to emigrate to the UK, for example? It's hard. And once you choose a school, especially when the kids are a little bit older, it's really hard to change the direction. So this is something that you should also have in mind when you look for even a primary school. So yeah, be aware. And of course, I mean, all schools have websites. You can read the requirements. You can see what kind of documents they need from you in order to apply. But there are very often, in many cases, in many schools, a lot of unwritten rules, actually, with the admissions committees will never share with you. And for example, working with a partner like us who has seen and done and sat in the meeting rooms, in the boardrooms with all the different admissions head and principals, it's very important to know these in between the lines knowledge. And of course, especially when the family decides to apply to a number of schools, it happens quite a lot that you forget a document or that you tick a wrong box. We are all busy and we all have our life at home, especially when we have several children. It's easy to forget something or to tick a wrong box. So it's a very valid concern to make a little mistake, which might derail the whole application. So a little bit about myself, and I'm very proud to say that I'm one of the few consultants who actually worked inside the system. I stayed in international schools for more than 12 years. I worked for a number of schools, which most of them you probably have heard of, including Yuchong International School, Kido Preschools, Shrewsbury International School, which is a British primary school. And the last 4 years I spent at the German Swiss International School, which is one or probably the top IB international school here in the region. And yeah, but what are the benefits, you might think? So I've seen it firsthand. I've worked with the different admissions teams. I saw how decisions are made. I met with hundreds of families. Um, I saw their problems. I saw also many problems which they didn't think is a problem. So again, many parents they don't even know what the problem is. Uh, Usually they don't know what they don't know, and they apply to these very popular schools, but they don't know that there are many other schools which really might suit their children much better. And I could see firsthand how admissions teams, how principals, how faculty team members actually make the decision. And it's not always only about the grades. I think the grades are a given, good grades are a given in many cases. But even like small things like when the parents come to the school and they cannot really explain why they choose the school, even if it might be in an informal setting, you're always monitored. Um, so always be careful when you communicate with the schools. And of course, it's very important for us parents to really understand the school ethos. And if it's something for you, um, I understand we all want the best for our children. We all want to have a great school. We want to have good grades. We want to have the best university future. But it comes at a price. So if you choose a school which has great reputation for being very academic, but it doesn't really match your family, your character, your beliefs, then that's definitely a problem. So it's and of course the schools also look at the parents and they worry, might do these parents really fit or do they only choose us because of our name? So there has to be a match on both sides. And also what I've seen is and I also became quite good at it. So whenever I met families for campus tours, for example, very often they also brought their children. And usually you can tell within a few seconds if the school would consider the child or not. I mean, not always, but there are always some pointers. especially for the younger children, which can make or break being considered or not. And especially for the very young children. I would say in general, it's probably not ideal to bring your young child to a campus tour because it can create a lot of problems because children are sometimes they have their own character and they might just run around and it can be quite disturbing for both sides, for the parents and the admissions teams. And of course, again, as I said, any point of contact with the school will give the school a first insight into the applicant. So be very careful. And I still remember I met so many families, and very often they brought their children. And in one case, there was this little girl, and she was just 6 years old. And in fact, she was the only one that when I met the family that looked me in the eyes. And when I asked her, yeah, hi, my name is Stefan. What's your name? Um, she didn't just say her name, but she actually used a full sentence. She said, uh, I just make the name up. Yeah, hi, my name is Jenny. Uh, I'm 6 years old and I'm happy to be here today. And I was blown away. This is very unusual because in most cases, students will either not acknowledge you at all or they will just use a one word answer like six or Jenny. So again, whenever you meet with schools and you want to make a good impression, so please make sure that you're prepared. I'm not saying you have to be over prepared, but you need to understand that schools will always judge you, even if it's just, let's say, a group campus tour. You will very often notice that, sure, there's always someone giving the tour, but you will very often also have two, three other colleagues from the school accompanying the group tour. So they already make their notes. So it's really important to know about this. So now I would like to explain to you the three different types of schools in Hong Kong. And this is something that you have to decide before you even move on. For example, what brand of school, what curriculum, and so on. So there are three main systems. First of all, the local school system. And to those in Hong Kong who are Hong Kong citizens or long-term residents, many of the parents probably went through the local system. And I've not attended the local system because I went to school in Germany. But what I've heard, it's very harsh. It's very academically driven, and there's not much room for creativity. Um, so the curriculum and diploma is called the Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education. And primary language in the local schools is Cantonese. There are some exceptions where they also teach in English, or there are even some schools who teach in Mandarin, but majority of the schools teach in Cantonese. So if you consider these schools even as a foreigner, you could do. And I also have friends also from international families, and they went, for example, for a local kindergarten or even local primary in order for the children to really immerse into the local culture. But it's hard um, because children really have to spend a lot of time on studying. They spend a lot of time in the school, but they also spend a lot of time actually after school and preparing for many high-stake exams. So the philosophy for the internet, for the Hong Kong local schools, from a majority of them, of course, there are some more holistic ones, but in general, is academic excellence. Good grades, sit down, repeat, don't ask questions, and a lot of high-stake exams, even in lower primary. And these schools will prepare the students for a local academic and a local cultural path. Now, the good thing for Hong Kong international schools is they are free. So it's a good opportunity or good option for those who would like to save some budget on education, but it comes at a price, and the pressure starts very early. Then there's a very interesting school type, which some of you might not have heard of, and it's called the direct subsidy scheme. So these are, in fact, schools which combine the local rigorousness plus the international holistic approach. And they offer per default also the Hong Kong DSE. And some of them also offer, for example, IB diploma or A levels. And the language of instruction in the DSS schools is usually English or sometimes bilingual, English and Mandarin. And here I think the benefit is it's a nice mix between the more academic approach of a local school plus the holistic approach of private international schools. And very often the facilities are also sometimes really, really good, even sometimes better than some private international schools. And it really gives the students access to both worlds. So I think this is a great thing. However, it's very challenging to get a place in these schools because it's very competitive. They have a lot of applicants, even more than international schools, mainly because also the school fees are very reasonable. Recently, I went to one of these DSS fairs here in Hong Kong, and those DSS schools, they start as cheap as 10,000 Hong Kong dollars a year. The more expensive ones charge 120,000, which might sound a lot, but yeah, we can see that the international schools are even more expensive. Um, so for international private schools, and also I would like to make you aware that there's a difference between internationally registered and private registered international schools. Um, International schools need to have a certain allocation for foreign passport holders. This is what they have to do. For example, for most international registered schools, they need to have at least 70% foreign passport holders. And here we also include those from the mainland. Um, so, which means for you, if your family, if your son or daughter only has a Hong Kong passport, this means that the chance to get an offer is already reduced by 70%. So this is something you have to know before you apply. It's very important to know about this rule. And of course, it also means that usually in international schools, you have a more diverse student body than, for example, in private schools. So in the last few years, more and more private schools have opened because it's easier to get the accreditation, to get a school and so on. So majority of the new schools in the region are actually private. And in private schools, they can accept any kind of passport. So there's no disadvantage for Hong Kong citizens. This is something you have to know before you apply. So what are the core curriculums? One is IB, the International Baccalaureate. Second, A levels from the UK. Then we have IP, which stands for Advanced Placement. We have the Canadian system. One of them is, for example, the Ontario system. And then also we have other more exotic curriculums like the German International Abitur, the DIA, which I also went through some years ago. And there are many choices. And also, I know that IB is very hot in Hong Kong, and many parents look for IB schools. But when we talk to them and ask them, why do you choose IB? We usually get blank stares. And parents usually choose it because they heard about it. Um, I always compare to like the Apple of curriculums. People just want it because they know about it and they haven't heard of the others. Um, but when I talk to specialists from schools, they often mention that IB is one of the hardest ones out there. Of course, it depends on the student, but IB is hard because students have to take all subjects, and it very often it might not be suitable for many students. And we can see a renaissance of diplomas like A levels or advanced placement because it gives students more freedom to choose. And in international schools, usually they were founded as English medium schools. And what we've seen in the past few years is that many international schools or private schools also now offer bilingual education. And bilingual education in Hong Kong usually means English and Mandarin. So in international schools, there's no Cantonese taught. I'm not aware of any school actually that uses Cantonese. There are some kindergartens which also teach in Cantonese, or they do a trilingual English, Mandarin, Cantonese. But from primary, secondary, it's usually English and Mandarin. And bilingual can also mean different things for different schools. They have different approaches. Some always have two teachers at the same time in the same class and they teach together. Some schools do it Mondays English, Tuesdays Chinese, and so on. And some do maybe math will be taught in English and geography will be taught in Chinese and so on. So it really depends on the school. And also something I would like to make you aware is that especially those schools who launched bilingual programs in the past few years, they didn't do it because they would like to promote Mandarin as a language. So very often it's calculated from the school because we have more and more students with less than desirable English skills coming to Hong Kong. And that's why they had to create these bilingual programs in order to not dilute the English level of the regular streams. So again, be very aware what kind of school you target if you want to look for a bilingual education. There are also many heritage bilingual schools, which basically started as a bilingual school. So this is probably more pure. But be aware when you look for schools who have just started their bilingual program, really talk to them, really try to understand what is the reasoning behind it, and also, yeah, make sure to do your homework. So the great thing for international schools is it's holistic. And holistic means that students actually can explore and do much more than just learning, than just academics. So learning actually happens every day through activity, through projects, through working with internationally minded students and teachers. So the child really develops wholly, not only academically, not only repeating, not only exams, but actually learning with every interaction every day. And these international private schools, they get the students ready for a future anywhere in the world. And this is the beautiful, beautiful thing about Hong Kong, because in most international private schools, you really have students and families from all over the world. I mean, what we can see, of course, and also because we're in Hong Kong, in most schools, we have a more Asian student body. But again, especially the Hong Kong families, many of them have lived abroad or have studied abroad. So we have many, many students from different backgrounds, different mindsets. And this definitely sets any student apart in order to be able to communicate, socialize, and work with students from different backgrounds. And I think this is priceless. And of course, students from international schools, they can of course study in Hong Kong because Hong Kong universities accept different kind of curriculums, but they can also study abroad or work abroad because they have worked with students from different backgrounds. So for them, it would be easy to transition maybe to another city like Singapore or New York. So that's a great benefit. One of the biggest problems, of course, for international schools is the very high school fees. And again, this is something where you have to look a little bit closer because it's a bit tricky. Um, so first, of course, schools will publish their tuition fees, which in some cases might look reasonable, but you need to look a little bit closer because schools might also charge something called a capital levy, which could be significant. I know a school, for example, they charge 40,000 or 50,000 capital levy in addition. Plus, some schools also charge a debenture. A debenture is like a refundable deposit. Like when you rent an apartment, you give a deposit, like, let's say 3 months of rent to the landlord, and after you move out, you get it back. It's similar for schools, but we're not talking about 3 months tuition fees. It can be as low as $100,000 to 10 million Hong Kong dollars. And for the very competitive schools, you're also expected to buy one of these debentures. And in some cases, it might also give you priority. There are even cases where family tend to debenture brokers here in Hong Kong who sell and buy from these schools, and of course also mark up the price. Again, it's a very sensitive topic, and this is something you also have to consider when you apply. You have to very carefully calculate the whole costs, especially when you have siblings, when you have 2 or 3 children. And also, very often, okay, schools might give a discount, but we're talking about 5% or 10%. So all the costs add up. And of course, you have school bus fees, you have activities, ECAs, and so on, lunch, and so on. It all adds up. And also, all the schools will increase their school fees every year. And they don't use absolute numbers. I don't know why, but schools here usually in Hong Kong, they will increase their school fees every year by a few percent, which is usually, it depends, 3 to 6%. And you never know before because the school will just announce a few weeks before you actually have to re-enroll or before you're registered. So the very often the school fees that you see on the website right now, they might not be the final approved school fees for next year. So be aware of this. And also because the use percentage, it accelerates the compounding effect on school fees. So you might yeah calculate for the next 10 years every year 5% increase. So it will definitely add up. So again, to summarize this, the big picture, be be aware of your financial situation, be aware of the cultural influences for each system. And in general, I think all students, even those expats, so-called expat students from outside Hong Kong, they could go to any of these schools, but every school comes at a price. So now, in order to make it even more complicated and quite boring for, I think, for some families, are the different curriculums. So again, we have the International Baccalaureate, which is in fact the youngest diploma in the world. It's only 40 plus year old, and it was founded in Switzerland. And to take an analogy is you can consider it like a Swiss knife. It's very versatile, very broad. So it does everything, but nothing really perfect. So the structure is you have to choose 6 subject groups. You cannot just say, oh, I don't like this, I don't want to do it. And they also have to do theory of knowledge, extended essay, like a creativity service. And it's very project based, very public speaking based, and a lot of research. So it's less about high stake exams, but students really have to do a lot of research. So the IB works well for those more like, I would say, more outgoing students, more versatile students, and all-rounders who are strong in all disciplines and who also really thrive on inquiry and structure. And to be fair, and as I mentioned earlier, that when I talk to the professionals, it's really, really hard to get really, really good grades in IB because you really have to cover all subjects, which I believe personally is not suitable for most students. And many people from schools also agree, in fact. Then we have the so-called A levels, and they come from the UK. It's the British system, and it's hundreds of years old. And it's very different from the IB. Here, the analogy is it's like a spear. So it's very sharp, it's very focused, and it's deep. So here, the difference is that students have to choose or can choose 3 to 4 subjects. So students, for example, who are really good in math and physics, they can focus on these subjects. So they can have really, really good grades and, of course, also have a great experience during the school time because they can study what they really like. And one benefit is compared to other curriculums, we don't have high stake exams. We have several unit exams. And also in some cases, if they fail, they can write them again, which is a huge benefit. So there's less anxiety. So who is it for? This is actually for students who already know what they want in the future, what they want to study, what they really like, and they really like studying very deep and very focused. Then as the third one, so I'm only covering the top three ones. There are some more, but I also don't want to overload you tonight. I just would like you to make you start thinking and to really do your research before you say, I want an IB school. So then we have advanced placement, which is from the US. And here the analogy is it's like a toolkit. So you have a lot of options. You can choose the subjects that you like. You can choose different areas. And here it's a little bit like a college approach. So it's like you choose A, B, C, and D, and E, F, and you study this. The difference, for example, to A levels is that you have high stake exams compared to A levels where you have unit exams. So it's very important to have a good grade at these high stake exams. So again, it's you can specialize, but you also need to achieve good grades in these high stake exams. So again, it might induce some anxiety for students. So for example, if you have a student who is very anxious about exams, it might be a good idea to consider A levels. Um, so again, before you choose a school and even before you say, oh, I want brand A or brand B, you really should try to look what kind of character is our child? Where would he feel comfortable? Where would he thrive? And then based on this, make your decision. So, and this is a very big part of why I created Lion Rock Education, because I've seen so many mismatches, so many broken students, so many sad homes because the parents choose a school for the wrong reasons. And it's in many cases, it's really heartbreaking. So what happens if you choose the wrong school? It creates a lot of stress and anxiety. So you might have a great student who's maybe, let's say, a B student. But if you send your student to a school where you only have A plus students, then the student will really struggle to keep up because the other students are even better, even faster, work even harder. And it just doesn't feel like it's good enough. It will lose its confidence. Um, it doesn't really mingle with the other students because they really operate on a different level. So it's hard for the child, even if it's a good child, but it's not fair for the child. So what happens when the child realizes the other ones are much better? So what could happen is it actually will underperform because the motivation just gets less and less because all other students always get really, really good grades, but the student also only has a B only. It gets disengaged, overwhelmed with work, and you also have to understand that we have a lot of families who actually also, they don't just send their students to a school, but they also send them to tutoring centers, even on the weekends. I have seen schedules, calendars where the students are even busy on a Sunday, where they have 3 or 4 activities, English, Chinese, piano, you name it. And also when we do the student assessment as part of our onboarding process here at Lion Rock Education, we had a student, a 9-year-old student, coming to us at 7 p.m. to have the student assessment. And then I asked him after the assessment, okay, what are you going to do now? Are you going home and relax a bit? And then he said, no, I have another Chinese tutoring class at 9 p.m. Um, so you have to understand the competition. And of course, if your child is struggling in the school, this will also come back to your home. It will create a lot of problem within the family between the child and the parents. A lot of homework has to be done. Performances have to match, and it just creates a lot of a lot of problems at home. And especially for us very busy parents, where both parents usually work, it creates a lot of unnecessary stress. But there is a solution to it. So what happens actually if you find the right fit? Again, for us and also language education, we do our best to find a school that really matches your child and the family. So once your child feels comfortable, feels happy at school, is safe, it also likes going to school and will do much more also voluntarily and will stay more time in school and will engage with others, will do more co-curriculars and so on. And they feel they belong. And this also becomes very good and very helpful for the family because the student likes to get up in the morning, is out of the house quickly, and when the student comes back, it's also happy. So this student is happy, and mommy and daddy are also happy. Plus, because the student feels like they belong into the school and are part of a tribe with the other students, they become very confident, very engaged. They're curious. They would like to learn more because for them, learning is natural. It doesn't feel like, oh my God, I have to do this and this and this. Of course, within reason, I believe there should always be a balance between happy school and academic school. But again, it also depends on the student. So of course, we have also interviewed students who are high academic achievers, and then we help them to get into high academic schools. But majority of students are not. And this is something that we can see in Hong Kong happening a lot, that these students have to go to these very highly academic schools. And you can see it in their faces. And then, of course, especially for the international private schools, as I mentioned earlier, they spend their time with students from all over the world. And this is priceless. Of course, they will all learn about the different continents and math problems and so on. But they will be with students from different cultural backgrounds every day. They develop really good friendships. They make a great network. And they have a very supportive community around them. So now, of course, this is probably something that most parents would like to know and would like to ask, like, what do schools actually look for? And I think one of the biggest misconceptions here in the region is that most families, they only focus on the grades, on the academic achievements. But schools look for much more. Um, because also, I think good grades are a given, and most students actually are good students. Um, but many schools, they also want a little bit of a mix. They don't want to have the challenging students, but they would like to have students who are really good in sports or who would do a lot of volunteer work or who are really curious. So again, they would like, and it should always be something that where the student can stand out. So they don't just want followers, especially the international schools. They look for leaders. They look for students who are coachable. They look for resilience. This is what many schools do. So again, whenever you apply to a school, also consider how can we add value to the school's community. So what do these very annoying admissions committees actually look for? So again, as I mentioned in the beginning, yes, they look for good grades, but it's not everything. And when I talk to the admissions heads, very often they tell me, first, potential. Do we actually, especially for like kindergarten, lower primary, like do we see there's potential? Of course, they might not be able to read and write yet, but you can see actually the way they interact with other children. Are these students also coachable? So when the school talks to them, do they actually listen what the school tells them? And are these students actually curious? For example, I went to a school this morning to an open house, and I asked them, why would you sometimes reject students? And they're actually quite inclusive, but they said, yeah, if we realize that the student is just sitting in the corner and just does what we ask them to do, but that's it, they're not curious. They don't have their own ideas or ask us questions. So again, especially those international schools, and actually across all of them, they look for curiosity and a willingness and a hunger for learning and also to interact with others. And this might be controversial because, of course, if you work with consultants like us, we will help you to prepare for the parents what to say when you meet the school. We will prepare students for interviews and exams. But again, it should not feel and look scripted. So your son or daughter, they don't have to act like a robot when they go to the schools. But it should be like a polished, real version of your child. What we see is that most families they apply blindly and then they get the first invitations and then the invitation says, okay, next Friday, please come to our interview. And then they start to freak out and start to scramble, start to contact us, for example, can you help us with an interview preparation and so on. But to be honest, it's already too late. You should actually prepare for school interviews and exams long before. And I'm not saying you have to get it 100% right, but especially for the younger children, you need to make sure that your children are comfortable in strange environments, in other places with adults, that they don't freeze or that they don't yeah, make silly jokes. um, what I've seen is that most, actually all children per default, they cannot detect the situation. So they will be the same person no matter who they are and where they are. But you cannot be a silly little boy when you are in an interview situation, for example. So you know how to play the game. And again, here it's important that you have a little bit of situations before you actually do this. And of course, you can work with consultants, or you can also maybe, I don't know, ask your family friend to talk to your child and then see their reaction and so on. Maybe someone they don't really know. Again, it's about acknowledgement and not overpackage, but be authentic. And of course, the whole application should be real, but of course, a little bit polished. And I think this is something that many families forget. Um, they usually apply for their children. Yes, fine. In many cases, I know they apply for the usual so-called top schools. But without actually putting much thought into it. And it's very important because schools will check on you and they will ask you very often, also very informal, like why do you choose this school, for example, even without directly asking you. So this is also very important for the parents. Please make sure that you understand the ethos of the school, that you understand the community, that you understand what the school looks for, and be very honest. Look in the mirror and think, is this really something we would like to be exposed for the next 10, 12, 14 years? Very important. And again, for your students, yes, good grades, of course, great. Any other achievements, math competition and so on is great. But especially international schools, they want to see resilience, they want to see integrity, and they also want to see kind, helpful students who actually also overcame problems. For example, if you meet with the admissions teams, you can say something like, "Oh, our son was really scared to speak in public, but then he suggested to sign up for the public speaking ECA, and then after a few lessons, he had his first presentation on the stage, and he was so scared, but he overcame his fears." So again, schools want to see how students progress, and they also don't want them to always be pushed by their parents. They want to see that the students actually came up with these ideas by themselves. So we as parents, I know in Hong Kong, we like to be always have their back and be with them all the time, but also give them some room to breathe. So what are the three most common pitfalls for applications? And there is no perfect solution, but some schools they also enable you to upload like motivation letters, any kind of certificates or achievements, or they will ask you some questions to some different cases, and really make sure that you adjust these documents or these replies to each school, because some schools might prefer maybe a little bit more holistic, some might be more academic, some really like more like sports achievements and so on. So really try to tailor your application as much as possible. Of course, we're not talking about the passport number and Hong Kong ID and date of birth and so on. But whenever there's some creative corners, please don't just copy and paste. Please really make sure that it's also interesting to each school. And of course, we know that many families in Hong Kong, they keep their children busy. Yes, it's not like in Europe where the students are usually free to roam around until night falls. No, in Hong Kong, they are always in any kind of tutoring centers or activities or the sports ground and so on. Great, but when you submit your application, please don't just put everything in the folder. It doesn't really matter if there was a kindergarten Christmas party and your child was participating. It's really only focus on those which are really outstanding and show how your student overcame a problem or how he was maybe one of the best ones in the class. So again, it's more about the depth. Um, it goes back to, again, resilience, passion, commitment, and how much the student actually participates. It should not always only be driven by the parents. Again, most parents will forget that they are also interviewed, that they also check. So really make sure that you understand why you want this school. Don't just say, our friend's daughter is also going to this school and they said it's a great community. No, you need to decide why you would like to choose this school. And again, this is something where you can also highlight your family. And we're not talking, okay, we have the biggest house on the peak, we have 3 Bentleys. No, it's about why your family would add value to this particular school. This is really important. So as one of the last slides, I would like to give you some ideas what you could do after our session. And this is also how we work at Lion Rock Education. So first of all, is the diagnose. So really have a very honest conversation about your child. Like, how does he learn? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? And what is his character or personality? How about our family? How about the siblings? How does it all work together? And really don't just do it like at dinner on the dinner table when everyone's playing with their mobile phones. Really put some time aside to really have these very honest and very emotional discussions, as where we see it all the time. And especially when we talk to parents, very often it seems that they actually talk about this in depth for the first time when they talk to us. And it changes a lot. And also at Line Rock Education, we actually also talk to the parents individually. So we ask the mom to go out for a few minutes and we only talk to the daddy and opposite. And this usually gives us the full picture, which is necessary. And really do your research. Don't just apply for a school because your colleague's cousin's daughter likes the school. Really look for a school that fits, because also not you have to go to the school. Sure, it's great when you can drop this name at your next dinner party, but your son or daughter has to go to the school every day for the next 10 years. And then we suggest to also not target like 15, 20 schools. Focus on 4 to 6 schools. And usually what we suggest, of course, you can choose like maybe 1 or 2 like really difficult to get in, but you should also have some schools who are a little bit more flexible so that eventually after you submitted all the applications that you could choose between 2 or 3 schools. And again, this is very important. You need to really understand the school. And what I've done in the past few months, I've actually visited more than 40 international schools and kindergartens here in Hong Kong. because it's so important to actually be on the campus and see the school for yourself, see how they interact, look in the faces, the body language of the students. And I had a few surprises when I went to schools where I had a very nice website, brand new, great videos, but it didn't look like this at all on the campus, or the other way around. Website quite outdated and they didn't really put much on Facebook, but then when you went to the school, it was like, man, that's a nice school. So really, really take your time, use open houses, but ideally try to visit the school on regular school days when it's not polished and set up so you can really see and feel. And of course, also see if you would like your son or daughter to look like the other students in the school. And then eventually, when you craft the application, really make sure that your application is well thought, that you make a nice little summary of everything, and that it really matches to each different school. So how can we help at Lionel Education? So we have actually a very simple one solution. In step number one, we develop a personalized and suitable school selection strategy. So we put a lot of emphasis on the research phase before we actually take any action. We talk to the family, we talk to the mommy and daddy individually. We send your child to one of our specialist partners to have an assessment. We review all the documents, and then based on our research, we will then match it with the International Schools database in Hong Kong. In fact, there are more than 70 international schools in Hong Kong, so there's a huge variety. Then the next point, once we agree on the schools that we apply to, we also help you to create compelling and authentic applications. We help you to submit those. We also help you to visit the school. And in many cases, through our deep network, we can also arrange private tours or tours where it's actually really hard to get in. Not in all cases, but in many cases. And eventually, once you receive the different invitations for assessments, we also help to prepare not only your child, but also the parents effectively. We have a wide network of partners who either work in schools at the moment or have worked in schools, which help us to prepare for different age groups and different kinds of schools. So, and this was, a first glance into a very cumbersome, quite annoying, and it can create a lot of anxiety process here to apply for international schools. We offer to make it a little bit simpler for you, that you can also focus on your work and your children. And if you would like to learn more, of course, please connect with us on WhatsApp or on WeChat. We also have Mandarin and Cantonese speakers in our team. And on the right side, you can also have, for your first start of the process, please download the free schools guide, which is a very simple PDF document which features all schools, all tuition fees, all curriculums, all application deadlines, and so on. And I will also share it with you after this session. And it definitely, I work with it every day. So it's a very simple PDF which you can also open on your mobile and so on. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope no one fell asleep yet. And please ask any questions either in the chat. So I have a first chat questions from John. Let me just read it. Yes, so that's a very good question. So in fact, thank you, John. So usually schools in Hong Kong have three main intakes, which is kindergarten 1, primary 1, and year 7, where secondary school starts. So this is usually where they add more seats. However, especially for year 7, you also have a lot of competition from local schools, for example, because many families would like to change from a local school to an international school. Um, Again, it depends on the school. So the very popular schools, it's hard to get in anyway. And of course, if you apply for, let's say, year 8 or year 9 or year 10, there's less competition. So it might also increase your chances. But usually what happens, especially for the very popular schools, they just don't have spaces. They will only open a space if current student actually physically leaves the class. So this might be a bit more draining because they might just give you an offer maybe during the year and not a few months before you start the year. So ideally, I would suggest all parents to target kindergarten one, year one, or year seven. Of course, some schools have different intakes, but usually across most schools, these would be the three main intakes. Megan, thank you for asking. Is it possible to send a child to local kindergarten and still get into a good international school? Yes and no. So it's Hong Kong can be very competitive. So in some cases, let's say if you want to go to university A, then it's better to go backwards and start, for example, in a kindergarten that gets you into a very good primary school and a very good secondary school. So some families even fight for places in a playgroup for 6 month and 1 year olds. Um, but again, it depends. And usually it is not a problem to start local and then go to international school. And many, especially the more academic international schools, they appreciate, especially when the child, yeah, you can say survived a few years in the local system with good grades. It's definitely possible. And some international schools appreciate it. And usually transition is much easier. But the other way around, it's much harder. So if you are an international school and then would like to go back to a local school, this is much harder, will be much more harsh. So yes, to summarize, it's possible, but again, it might require some research and some knowledge, also some insider knowledge, like which kindergartens would be seen favorable from different international schools, because each international school have feeder kindergartens or sometimes unofficial feeder kindergartens and even playgroups. So it might be worth to start the whole process early if you have a particular school in mind already, and this is something we can help with. I hope this helps. What are the next questions? Happy to reply any questions. You can also just speak if that's easier. On the other hand, I mean, if you don't have any other questions today, that's fine as well. I hope it was helpful today and that you can take home a few more details and a bit more confident. And of course, please have a look at the planner. And yeah, we are very happy to have a consultation with you. So the first consultation is always complimentary, where we can understand your situation and then also share our solution with you. And if there's something for you, just in general, try to start as early as possible and take it really serious. And it takes time. The whole process takes time because schools are also notorious for not being the fastest to reply and a little bit secretive and back and forth and school holidays and so on. So try your best not to be in a rush. Um, do we have any final question tonight? No. Okay, fine. Yeah. Oh, okay, John, thank you very much. And yeah, let's keep in touch and yeah, be confident, be brave. Okay, we have one more question from Cecile. Hi, Stefan. Is it a good choice to target good local DSS schools if the child does not fit in, then switch to international school? I mean, very often what we see is that families try a local or DSS school first or kindergarten and try to survive as long as possible. Um, but you can see it latest in upper primary school that most parents will then really give up and change to a private or international school. But again, it depends on the child. I mean, if your child is really very academically driven, it might be worth. But I believe, especially in the younger ages, like kindergarten and so on, it might be a good idea to try a local environment first because the differences are not yet that much. Um, but again, you have to understand that even in the local like lower primary schools, the pressure's on very quickly, and even in kindergartens where they have homeworks and so on and presentations. So don't take it too light. I hope this replies to your question. Yeah, again, I don't want to keep you too long. Have your dinner. Let's keep in touch, and thank you so much for attending today. Thank you, everyone.